I'm here with Coach Don Benke of Stevens Point High School. Don is a Wisconsin Cross Country Coaches Association Hall of Fame member and absolutely one of the most successful coaches in the history of Wisconsin cross country. Don, can you talk about your journey into running and then coaching cross country?
I grew up in Milwaukee, had no intention of being a distance runner, loved baseball, but my brother was on the cross country team, so people assumed that I would be a runner, and I got talked into going to practice, and I was sure was going to hate everything about it, and it was the most difficult thing I did. It was a hot, humid August day, and it was miserable, but there was something about it I loved, and I got pulled into this group of guys, the banter, the camaraderie, the fun. It's hard to explain it to people who haven't experienced being part of a team like that, and how as a young, shy 15-year-old kid I got pulled into this very successful program with an outstanding coach. Leo Potashnik was his name. He's also a Hall of Fame coach, and so at that point Marshall was one of the best cross-country programs in the state, and before I knew it I was sort of in the thick of this thing. I wasn't terribly good at this. My brother was given a lot more raw ability than I had, but I was passionate about it. I made some great friends, and it's the reason that I went to college. I was on the 1970 state championship team at Marshall, and then my high school coach told me, he didn't suggest I go to college, he told me I should go to college, and I ended up here at UW-Stevens Point, which was a really good place for me because they had a really good track program, but they didn't have distance runners. And so I knew this was a place where I could go and I could step in and I could be running on the front line, and I could run a lot of races, and I did, and it was great for me. I also discovered that I had a passion for helping my teammates and encouraging the guys on the team, and it was my teammates who started saying to me, you should probably change your major and go into education and coaching, and that's how I ended up here. I got my first job at UW-Stevens at Stevens Point High School right after I graduated, and I was going to be there for a year, and then I was going to look for jobs in the Milwaukee area because that's where the jobs were at the time.
If I can interrupt, yeah. What year did you graduate from high school and then graduate from college?
I graduated in 71, and then got out of college in 75. I went back and student taught in 76. Then I got my first coaching job as assistant track coach at SPASH. That's how I started, just to get some experience. And jobs were really tough to find at the time, teaching jobs in particular. So cross country 1977 was my first year at SPASH.
And were you the head coach then right away? Or?
I was, yes. I was assistant track coach with a guy named Wayne Steffenhagen, who coached for many years at DC Everest, won a bunch of football state titles. He was the head track coach at SPASH at the time, and he was terrific. I learned a lot from him. And so I just had really no coaching experience prior to that. And that first year, I just ended up with about 22 guys, and they enjoyed running, and we built a team. They believed in what I was trying to tell them, and we ended up fourth at the state meet the first year. We were 24 points away from winning it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I'd been coaching those guys since track, so less than a year. It was pretty dramatic. Yeah, rather shocking.
And where was the state meet in those?
That was at Yahara, and that was the year that La Crosse Central was really dominant, and they didn't run all that well. I think they beat Oak Creek by a point.
Okay.
And that was back when we only had 12 teams in the state meet, so it was a much smaller thing than it is today. Yeah. So points didn't get spread around that much, but still our guys ran really well, and they're pretty excited about it. And I was going to leave, but then they found a teaching job for me, and I stuck around.
And what area did you teach?
Taught social studies at the high school, and then I got transferred to the junior high. So I spent most of my career teaching 8th grade social studies and coaching cross country, which is, and yet it's been really rewarding. I love the grade level I taught, and I just love coaching, obviously, like so many of us.
Well, and I did some research on this, and I think it's 12 state championships and 9 state runner-ups,
Right.
I believe.
Right.
Now, when was your first podium, your first team to get a?
1980 we won it, and then we won it in 81 and 82 we got beat by a single point at the state
Was
meet.
that Menominee Falls?
At Menominee Falls.
Yeah.
Yep.
I remember
Mount
that.
Reimer.
Yeah, that was
And,
at Parkside.
it was at Parkside,
Yeah.
and it was just one of those things at the finish line where one of our guys fell, and that we'll never figure that one out. But then the following year, 83, we won it, and then in 84, it was at Christmas Mountain Village, where that ski resort thing, and I'm told this is the first year that they computerized results, and there was a lightning strike, and something took out their system, and I don't know that they had a backup. So we lost that one by a point, but our newspaper guy who was standing at the finish line counting places, he felt that it was a tie and that we would have won on the tiebreaker. But again, we'll never know that one. And then in 85, in the snowstorm in Madison, when they postponed for a week, we were the number 2 ranked team behind Manitowoc. They were a really good team that beaten us twice during the year, and just as luck would have it, the conditions just really favored the kind of runners we had on that particular day.
Well, that's that's a pretty remarkable
It was
run in there.
It was a good stretch. That was sort of the golden age, and
Yeah.
then you can't field teams like that every year, and but we've been pretty consistent over the years to have 12 state titles.
And the number of athletes you get out, are you in the 50s?
High school guys,
75?
we're typically, our high school team is somewhere in the 60 to 70. And we're one of the odd programs where we have our junior highs come and run with us. It wasn't a plan. It was one of the guys brought his little brother to practice, and then somebody brought their little brother, and pretty soon we had 5 of them, and we threw them in a junior high race, and we won. And it got reported in the paper, and my AD called me in and said, "Don, I see we won a junior high meet." And I said, "Yeah, we did." And he said, "We don't have a junior high team." And I said, "Well, apparently we do." And he told me we couldn't. And I said, "Well, okay, you go tell these parents." And then the parents said, "Well, we want a junior high team." And so that's really sort of taken off. We have 2 junior highs, and so we shuttle the bus the kids up to us. So it's pretty odd that we have often somewhere in the area of 40 or 50 junior high kids that 7th, 8th, 9th graders, well, 7th and 8th graders, the 9th graders are on a high school team, but so it's not unusual for us to have 110, maybe 115. I think the biggest team we've had is 117, but that's 2 junior highs and our high school, and just one big group, which, seems like maybe that shouldn't work, but it does. It's been really good for us.
Oh, that is so cool, and I think anyone would say a strength of continuity with your program is to have those junior high kids, and they're there at the meets to see how well the high school kids are doing.
They're at the meets. They're often at the state meet, and when we are fortunate enough to win one, they're on the bus with us, and as we come back into town with the fire range ahead of us. And so, if you're a little 7th grader that's sort of the misfit kid that can't do any other sport, or even if you're the kid that's not a misfit that can actually do this, it's a pretty fun environment to be around. And these guys that are seniors, they've typically been really good role models for the younger guys, and you just can't get enough of that in today's society.
Now, I've got to ask you, because one of your first early superstars, Keith Christensen?
Hansen.
Keith Hansen, right?
Hansen,
Yeah. He was really a remarkable runner. Do you want to talk a little bit about? I know he talked about the mileage he did and his dedication.
Yeah. My first year of coaching, I had 2 guys, 20-some guys on the team. One guy named Pete Scorseth, who was a junior at the time.
I remember that name, yeah.
And he said to me, he wanted to get a college scholarship. And I laughed. And I said, "You're a cross-country runner. That doesn't happen." He goes, "What if I'm a state champ?" And I said, "Well, if you're a state champ." He goes, "Well, that's what I'm going to be." And then he turned it on me and said, "Tell me how to be a state champ." So I sat down and I talked to him, and I was just out of college and figured, train like a college guy. And he did. And a year later, he's the state champ. He got a free ride to Marquette. We had a freshman on that team named Keith Hansen, who watched this whole thing. And he just watched Scorseth, who was, at the time, he was not afraid to run mornings. He was not afraid to knock out 100-mile weeks. Consistently, just week after week, in season, out of season, and he was just a beast. And Hansen did the same kind of thing. Took it to the next level, the next extreme. So Keith was the kid who was the most awkward, clunky little runner you ever saw. He was anemic looking. I don't know that he ever ran faster than a 57 quarter in his entire life. And this kid just evolved into this terrific runner. He ran 8:53 for 2 miles by his senior year, which, with the old-fashioned shoes that they had at the time, and back in the dark ages. And he got the ride to Marquette, spent 4 years there, Division I All-American, Division I national champ at 10,000 meters. He was ranked in the world, ran the Olympic trials in 1988, and that was just a remarkable story. That was probably, well, it was certainly the best experience for me as a young coach, to see this kid. It's one thing to look at a kid like Pete Scorseth and go, that kid's got talent. That kid's an athlete. He is tough as nails. We can make him into a runner. But when you looked at Hansen, you went, why would I care if this kid quit? And I did. So, he just kept coming back and just gets stronger each year. And he set the standard for our team. We had lots of young guys that wanted to train at that level, and I have his training logs, and I've given it to guys and said, here, you can look at this, but promise me you'll never do this. He had the 150-mile week, he had the 50-mile day, he did 5 10-mile runs one time in a single 24-hour day. There wasn't anything he wouldn't do or couldn't do. And, so here you have this clunky kid that he didn't look like any of the other runners, and yet and I asked him after he won the state meet, I said, Keith, how many guys in that race have more talent than you? And his answer was, all of them. And everybody kind of went, yeah, I think that's probably right. So, yeah, that he was in that group he was there in 1980 and 81 when we won those 2 state titles.
And so his senior year was which year?
81 cross country, 82 track.
Okay, yeah. So, and 81 would have been that epic year of Hacker and Stinzy.
That was 80.
Oh, 80,
when
followed 80, yes.
Hacker and Stinzy and Jenkins.
Yeah. And Easker and
yes.
those kids that graduated.
Oh, that was phenomenal. And Hansen was a junior, and he walked up to me before the race and he said, I'm going to win this thing. And I grabbed him by the shoulders and I said, no, you're not. You are not going to. Do not even think about that. And he was a little upset with me, but not with that group. And then the next year when he wanted to win, it's like, okay, now this year I think is your chance. And of course, Kurt Anschutz was there, who was awfully talented, and that was one of the great races that anybody's ever seen at a state meet. Mm-hmm. And Keith came out on top at the very end of that, the last half mile, when it kind of turned his way. Mm-hmm. So that kind of got the program off the ground there, and then we got into the late 1980s where soccer got started here, as it did everywhere, and it really took some of our young kids out of the program. And I'd come to practice and look around and go, where are the good guys and where are the bad guys? Where are the average guys? That we just need bodies here. And because that's what it comes down to, because you see these kids that you don't think have much talent, but if you can get them to show up every day, you can build some pretty good runners out of guys that you just don't really think that they're that talented.
Yeah, they don't have to be the state champion, if they can be that role player, that 4 or 5 guy for you, that the difference maker.
Yeah, you live and die with that kid in 4 and 5. How many teams do you see at the state meet that they've got 2 or 3 really good kids, but you just can't get that 5th guy across the line. We've been in that position too, where you just wish that you had the one more kid that was healthy.
Well, then as you got into the '90s, you had some state championships there.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
did. Yeah. The uh, our 90, 91, 92 teams, we really were trying to rebuild something. I was not coaching at Spash in '87. I got laid off. I got a job in Wisconsin Rapids. I coached there for a year. Then I came back. And so in the meantime, you know, that continuity that's so important to a team was lost for a year. And so we had to rebuild that. And then we built the 1994 team that won it. And then I know that Arrowhead had some really good teams in there for a couple of years in the '90s, and then we were able to win it in '97 and '98 with some really good, deep, talented teams there. And then we've been pretty consistent throughout this. We did have a couple of years where we didn't get to the state meet. That would have been, we were state champs in '03, and then we didn't get there in '04 and '05. We got assigned to a pretty tough sectional, which it was unusual for us because a lot of times, we have an easier path to get to the state meet than a lot of the schools do. Although now, I mean, you look at some of these sectionals and I don't know that it's, 20 teams, I don't know if it's as tough as it historically has been to get to a state meet. There are some teams that are getting in the state meet that maybe shouldn't be. So we had a couple tough draws there in '04 and '05. Our kids ran really well. They gave it their all. No regrets about it. It's just how it works out sometimes. So we've been on that side of the fence on a couple of occasions, not often.
Well, we spoke about Keith Hansen and Pete Scorseth as well, state champs. But
Yeah.
my opinion on there is Chris Zielinski is absolutely probably the best cross country runner the state has ever had. Now, all props aside to Gabe Jennings and to Olin Hacker and Bosley and and a whole number of people
Yeah.
in there. But you want to talk about Chris, because Chris was 3 times state champ, correct?
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And his freshman year he placed where?
25th or 26th.
Yeah.
I'm close with that. I agree with you, but I also agree that we've had some really, really good individuals out of this state. And boy, to put your name at the top of the list, while I agree, I don't, boy, we had some good kids, especially of late, and even right now, some of our top runners in the state are pretty amazing talents. Chris's dad ran for me in those early years, back in the '70s. His mom was on the cross country team. I remember we went to their wedding, and then a couple of years later, I'm reading the newspaper and I saw the birth announcement, and he was born on December 5th. And I remember saying to my wife, "Hey, they named him Christopher. It's Christmas time." And I said, "There's a little runner." And, sort of joking, but at the same time, I don't joke about that. I'm thinking, yeah, this is a kid I want to see, 12 to 13 years from now. And his parents made him come to practice. He didn't really want to be there. He told me that he made it a point not to talk to me for the first 2 weeks because he didn't want to like me. And so I had no connection really with the kid. And then he ran our inter-squad time trial, and he ran really well. And I turned and I saw the varsity guys took him out on a cool down. And all of a sudden, he's one of the big guys. And he didn't come out as a 7th grader because he played soccer, but he came out as an 8th grader. And that turned the corner. He was one of us. And he always missed soccer. He kept saying that to me many times. And finally, there was one time I watched him sign a dozen autographs for a whole bunch of cute high school girls. And afterwards I said, "You got to stop saying that thing about soccer. You are living this life where girls come up to you and make a fuss over you and they ignore everybody else. But, all of a sudden he's the big shot and he's a celebrity. I mean, what cross country kid is signing autographs when you're in high school?" And he did. And that was really fun. It was interesting watching him progress. And I would not say that as an 8th or a ninth grader we said this guy's going to be the next great thing. Right? We always said he's going to be a good runner. He is a good runner. He's destined to be, maybe he can be a state champion, but then he dropped that effort at the Ridges his sophomore year when Matt Esche went out hard and Chris went up and got him. And boy, that was a pretty dramatic win, pretty unexpected to take down the defending state champion. Although the field wasn't as deep that year as it has been most years. And I think that was kind of the trend there for a while. There would be that one dominant guy that everybody thought, well, nobody's beating him. And I mean, we didn't really send Chris out to win that race, but we said, that's the guy. And if you get a chance, you may be able to run him down late. And he sure did. And then after that, I mean, it was just sort of, you watch the progress he made during track, and then I started to feel, and I know Chris did too, that he was actually a better track guy than a cross-country guy. That at his size, that the muddy terrain was not kind to him. He liked that firm surface, and I'm sure he'd be a guy that would love to have these new shoes that they have.
Oh, yeah.
He could get a pair of those and go 10K.
Yeah.
Because I ran 10K in college, and I kept saying to him, you got to go 10K, you got to try it. He wanted nothing to do with it in college, and until they set that time trial up with Galen Rupp, and then all of a sudden he breaks the American record, his first time running the event.
Yeah.
So.
Well, the first American under 27, right?
Yes, he was the first non-African to go sub 13 and sub 27.
Yeah.
I know there's a bunch of guys that've done it now, but.
Well, the thing I noticed about his career, it was pretty linear. That there weren't plateaus in there, and I think I remember from high school that it was he just kept making steady progressions,
and that was him in college as well. And I remember having a discussion with him at one point saying, "Yeah, you've been really successful here as a sophomore, but you don't want to be that guy where they go, whatever happened to him?" Because it happens, and we don't know why. For some people, they do plateau. So, what did you run 9:08 for 2 miles as a sophomore? And it's like, whoa, that's serious. But there's no guarantee you're ever running any faster than that. But then, he went into the he went 9:48 and he went 9:43 or 8:48, 8:43. So yeah, I mean, and then he got to college and it was the same progression, and the only real hiccups in his career were the days when he got on muddy courses, and that just didn't suit him very well. And then, of course, he got the hamstring injury that ended his career so quickly. And that, I mean, he had a wonderful career in high school and college, and professionally. But boy, you hate to see that happen to anybody, where you go from the top of the mountain to being done, and you never get that second chance to make the Olympic team.
And and most pros, they've got a good 5-year run of staying highly competitive,
Yep.
and he was just at the beginning of that.
Yeah, you hope so.
That expectation.
Yes. You get hooked up with Nike when they can write you a contract and you can get some of the perks and travel the world, and it was pretty cool.
So Chris graduated in 03, I believe.
Yes,
right?
he was 02 cross country, 03 track.
03 track, and you continued to put out great teams. I think that your team last fall, I said to you after the meet, I think that was the best cross-country team I've ever witnessed in there. Just looking at numbers of it and how, dominant on scores, so dominant and time-wise. And, that was a top 5 that is all coming back for you.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable, this group of guys that we have, and how consistently good we've been. And unfortunately, we had the COVID year where we didn't get to compete in the fall season. That was a mess anyway, but and I'm not saying that I think our school district made the right decision, and I'm really thankful that we got the chance to do the spring season And that was a really good team that we had. And we got to run that course in Janesville, which was odd to run cross country in the spring. And then the next year we returned a bunch of those guys, and I thought we were going to be really a good team there. And, you know, we were good, but boy, there were some really good teams in that 21 state meet, and we walked out of there going, what just happened? But, you know, we had some injuries and illnesses that came along, and it's been real tough to navigate the whole COVID thing. We've had a few guys get that. But then we got this next group of young kids, and they've really blossomed into something. It hasn't been easy. This group has been hurt and nicked up and sick more than any group we've ever had. And you just sort of stop and think, what if we ever can get these guys healthy long enough to really train them? At the end of the state meet last year rather, when I said to Kevin Hopp, Kevin, we've never done more with less training than this group. And what they did at the state meet was stunning. That Kevin and I were shaking hands with a quarter mile dude. We've never done that, even with those other really good teams that we've had. And Oconomowoc was good, and you know they had the SCOO guys way up front. So, you know, it wasn't like a weak field. There were all kinds of good individuals up front, and our guys were, you know, 2 juniors and a freshman and 2 sophomores. I mean, that doesn't happen very often sometimes you win with that combination, but not often that you just dominate and average 16-0 something on that course. Although conditions were good, but certainly our guys really, really ran well, and we did manage to get them healthy, even though our top 2 guys really were injured much of the season. Spent a lot of time in the pool to work their way through that. So probably paid dividends though then when they went to the Nike Regional in South Dakota, because it had shortened their season a little bit, and we shifted it a little bit, so it sort of naturally worked out, and then they ran so well at the regional, and then by the time we got to the national meet in December, that's a little tough to navigate for some of our Midwestern teams when the weather changes here and the season gets a little bit long. Yeah. Although we ended up, I mean, if anybody who ever gets a team that goes out there will tell you that, I mean, it's the most wonderful thing for any high school athlete. The way they treat you out there is not like anything any cross-country kid is ever going to even expect to come across, and our guys just loved every second of it.
Now, another thing I've got to ask you about, I think every veteran coach has some heartwarming stories of a particular team, and you took one of those seasons and wrote a best-selling book. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, it was 1985, and you know, I've got a collection of running stories that, you know, kids in the program have heard, but, you know, by far and away what happened in 85 was the most remarkable. And the short summary is that this kid joined our team. He was a special needs kid. He was awarded the state. He lived in a group home, and comes to practice, and, you know, nobody thinks this kid's even going to show up the next day, but loved being a part of the team. And, you know, as cross-country runners tend to do, and cross-country coaches tend to do, we take on some of these kids that other activities at school would turn loose. And I don't have time for that, but, you know, we can take on some of those projects. And, you know, we only did it because it was the right thing to do, because that's just what we do. And it was really like the same thing with Keith Hansen. You know, here's the kid that nobody expects him to turn out to be anything, but we give him a chance because everybody gets a chance. And this young man's name was Scott Longley, and turned out that he developed into a varsity runner, and ended up being part of our state championship team that year in the blizzard at Yahara Hills. It's pretty remarkable. I knew at the time, and in fact, as I was standing there at the state meet waiting for the gun to go off, I remember saying to Rob Sparhawk, who was one of my assistant coaches at the time, he coached later at Amherst and a couple of other high schools. And I said, Rob, somebody needs to write a book about this. And at that point, I didn't know how the end of that was going to play out, but it didn't matter because this was just one of those stories that everything sort of fell into place. And it's like, well, you couldn't make the stuff up. It just had to be the reality of this unusual situation, a group of guys on the team we didn't expect to be that good. It turned out that, there was 3 or 4 good teams in the state. So, we got to the state meet. We knew we could. We knew we could be in the top couple, but did we really think that we were going to take down a really good team, talented kids from Manitowoc, a pretty senior heavy team, and probably no question about it, the fact that this snowstorm, sometimes you have the right group of guys that are just set up to run in those terrible conditions, and our awkward, clunky guys looked like they were at home out there. Plus, there was the tremendous motivation that we had this extra little thing that you can't quantify. How do you motivate kids? Everybody wants to win on the day, but there's a little something extra in this particular story. So I'm just glad that I took the time, put in the effort to write this book, and it's been really well received. And thanks to my daughter, who is such a good writer and such a good editor, and so good at pushing me to be the best writer I could be. Ended up with a pretty good result.
Well, that's awesome. Now, little promo for it, the name of the book, and then where it can be purchased on Amazon.
Yeah, it's called The Animal Keepers, and it's on Amazon. It's been in Barnes and Noble, and I've walked into the bookstore, and I got to tell you that it's pretty shocking for somebody who never thought I would write anything longer than a grocery list, and so here I am in Barnes and Noble, and I see it sitting on the shelf, and my wife will go over there and she'll take it and she'll turn it sideways so that people can see it. Try to promote this just a little bit. So.
Oh, that is so cool. But it is, it's such a rewarding, heartwarming story, and I think every coach, I think every human being would enjoy. It's the underdog story and the self-esteem that this Scott, got from being on the team. It just is.
Yeah, there's so many layers. There's so many good lessons, and I, as I've talked to so many coaches, and I see this happen all the time, that it's a little bit unique to our sport that we take on some of these project kids, and I see it happen all the time. And I have coaches say, well, "We had a kid like that. We remember this kid." And I remember talking to a volleyball coach, and I said to her, "Well, you've got a story like that, don't you?" And she said, "No." She said, "That's the first kid I cut." I appreciated her honesty, but I'm like, okay, well, that is coaching in some other sports where you don't have time for that kid, even though maybe that kid turns into something. But, certainly in this case, it was just one of those things that, in fact, people say that maybe this should be a movie, and I've actually signed a contract with some screenwriters in California who are trying to get this thing out there, and they've every once in a while they get back to me and go, "We got somebody interested." But so if there's anybody out there that has $50 million and wants to throw it in a movie here, so.
I don't have Steven Spielberg's phone number on speed dial or anything like that.
If anybody knows him, that make a connection. Maybe we get this going.
Well, anything else that you can think of that is neat anecdotes about their coaching? I mean, you've been a coach for how many years?
I've got 46 years, and so I'm coming back next fall. Got to see how these guys turn out, and even though I can't run anymore and I move pretty slowly around the course, I've got Kevin Hopp, I've got Harrison Smith, I've got Sam Anderson, runners from the program that have come back to us, and they really do just a terrific job. And people will say to us that, if they listen to us, our kids are hearing the same message from whether it's me or Kevin or Harrison or Sam. The message is consistent. Just show up, give your best effort, bring something to the team, even if you're not very talented. Everybody can contribute something, and be a decent human being when you come here. We can't fix the problems of the world, but we can maybe fix our little corner of it and make this a welcoming place. And I'm going to become a grandfather in a couple of weeks. And I said at awards night that, and I'm going to try not to get too emotional here, I said at awards night that I don't know what my grandson's going to be. Maybe he's going to be a soccer kid. Maybe he's going to love golf or tennis or NASCAR. I don't care. I just hope that he finds a place that will welcome him in the same way that our team does, that we traditionally have. Whether he's Chris Zielinski, guy who can do everything, or whether he's Keith Hansen or Scott Longley or any other kid that has been thrown off and cast off of every other team, because most of us are not very athletic. I would have loved to have played baseball in high school and college, but I just didn't have that ability. But with running, I just showed up and gave my best effort, and I love the fact that my high school coach appreciated that, and he valued that, and he made us feel good about ourselves. And that's what won me over, and that stuck with me. And there's just a part of me that I feel like I'm still that high school kid, that shy misfit kid, just trying to. I know what that feels like, and I hope that the kids on my team, that they feel that this is a safe place for them to show up and work hard. And I see that at a lot of programs, a lot of good coaches. I mean, obviously you did the same thing at Arrowhead, and I see there's a consistency of the good programs and the good coaches that are successful year after year. I think that's that foundation, that we bring kids in and they want to be there and they want to be a part of this and they feel valued. So.
And that I believe what you just did is the heart and soul of the sport. And, that's just, it should be the best selling point that we could ever make, belonging and working hard and making each other better.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for taking the time to do this interview. Congratulations on your most successful coaching career, and good luck this fall in your quest for a 13th state championship.
We'll see what happens. We'll keep them healthy.
Okay.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.